The defeat of the South in America's Civil War left the region's decision-makers with a huge labor problem. There were millions of acres of southern plantations, which had relied on slave labor to produce the cash crops that powered the United States economy to global significance in just over a century. And now, there were millions of Africans who had been freed by the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. Plantation owners feared these former slaves might seek vengeance. Why would formerly enslaved Africans accept white supremacy when they were now free? After centuries of social Darwinist intoxication, Southern whites detested the idea of black independence and a free society without a racial hierarchy. Plantation owners were terrified that these former slaves could not be controlled without the horrors of slavery. More importantly, who would do the labor-intensive planting and harvesting that would maintain the plantation as America's supreme money-making machine? Surely, the money could not be left in the ground to rot. Answers to all these questions arrived quickly in the form of black codes. These were first enacted in Mississippi and South Carolina in 1865, just 1 year after the end of the Civil War. The black codes were characterized by the absolute requirement to deny the political inclusion of Africans living in the South. It was vital to limit their employment and property ownership rights too, and to restrict their movement and freedom of travel. Blacks without proof of employment could be imprisoned, a particularly useful tactic in criminalizing the country's black population and returning it to forced labor. Blacks were prevented from serving on juries and owning firearms. The black codes provoked a legislative backlash from the North, in the form of the 1866 Civil Rights Act. It declared that all citizens, except Native Americans, should be equally protected by the law. But the legislation was toothless and ineffective. When set against the scale of white fear and resentment, the economic demand for a vast pool of servile cheap labor, and the social and political priority of maintaining African exclusion. Without land reform and the long-term commitment to guarantee Africans full citizenship, education and autonomy, slavery continued as institutionalized racial inequality, maintained by segregation, disenfranchisement and economic coercion. The black codes paved the way for full-spectrum racial subjugation through Jim Crow laws, which disfigured American society for decades. More importantly, the black codes continued the dehumanization of Africans, reinforced the country's racial hierarchy and normalized racial exclusion in every aspect of American life.